Welcome back to Session 2 of the Beginning Life Together series. This session is titled Connecting with God's Family. I appreciate you're taking the time to prepare for your role as a leader. If your group is rotating leaders and you're leading for the very first time, I want to applaud your courage. I also want to thank you as a leader to maybe bring somebody along with you and maybe even encourage you next week to have someone join you to watch this lifter and maybe take that huge step of faith to facilitate next week's session. God is here for you, and so am I, but God really is the one that is going to be in your corner as you lead this session. The fact that you're here, though, says that you survived this first session. Please view, if you are here for the very first time, on the disc called Leaders Watch Me First, if you've yet to watch that. It really sets up some of the basic information on how to lead the Doing Life Together series groups. Also, I want to say, please check out what is titled in the appendix, Leadership 101, on pages 77 and 79. You might want to turn there right now in your study guide. And also, frankly, if you'd like to see what God is doing in groups just like yours all over the world, why don't you just check out additional information and stories at lifetogether.com. Your teacher for this session is a guy named Steve Farrar. He's a bundle of energy and a lot of fun. What I'd like you to do now is just listen to Steve's passion and what he hopes that your group is going to get out of this first session.
Well, I think what's critical in Bible study and group Bible studies is that we've got to get them into the text. We've got to get them into the Word of God and see the principles, let them grab the truth, and then give them application. Give them handles. Put the cookies on the lower shelf. I think the best communicators are the simple communicators. You don't have to use the big words. You don't use the Greek. You don't, the theological. You just put it down where Jesus, a 5-year-old kid can understand Jesus.
Sure.
I think that's how we ought to do it. Keep it simple, keep it straight, and apply it.
It is. It's real practical. I mean, you've done so many books, and you've spoken in so many different settings with men and couples and all kinds of scenarios, certainly in church. But what is it about this particular setting that you really hope that will come out in the evening as they study this particular lesson, Steve?
Well, I think we have the opportunity to take the Scriptures, and then as we talk about it, to talk about what God has done in our lives in different situations. We've all been through fire. We've all been through adversity. We've all been through things that we wish that we hadn't have gone through.
Sure.
But what that does is, I think those are the things that equip us for ministry. And I think in small groups like this, if we can get comfortable enough to start being authentic, sure, and to start being genuine and to be secure enough to share our weaknesses, that's when other people relate. And then you got something. Then you got some juice. Then you got some sizzle in the fajita.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Then things start happening.
They feel safer, and they feel like they can, if it's happening in your life, okay, then they can feel like, I can be,
We're all in the same boat, dealing with the same stuff. A lot of times people think that guys that lead, that are up front, they don't struggle with the stuff that I struggle with.
Yeah.
That's not true. We're all dealing with stuff. And I think if we'll share that, and Paul said that he gloried in his weakness, mm-hmm, because his power is perfected in weakness. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about our weaknesses enough, I don't, mm-hmm, think. But when we do, people are drawn to us and say, well, gosh, I can relate to him. I think that's effective leadership.
Do you remember the time that someone first tapped you on the shoulder and invited you first to church? And the other time that someone invited you to your first small group? What I'd like you to do is to kind of even think back on who that was and when that happened. And just connect with maybe the gratitude that you have even in this moment of what that meant to you and what that's become and produced in your life. Last week, if you did the open chair exercise in session 1, some people may be joining you brand new this week. You don't even know it, but they're going to come to your door, or they're going to jump in your group. Make a point of specifically welcoming them yourself. And as they first arrive, because, when they come first, like, most new people, you want to be the first one to be able to look them in the eye, welcome them, and introduce them to a few of the folks as they come in. When the meeting first starts, after everybody sits down, ask them to introduce themselves and to say how they heard about the group. And then have everyone else in the group proceed by introducing their names and just share one thing that they got out of last week's meeting. This is a great way to give people 10 new reasons why they should stay in a group when many times they don't. when they visited an existing group. Be sure also to remind people again, one more time strongly in session 2 here, about the value of the open chair at the end of this meeting. Jesus wants us to have the same heart that he had for people who aren't connected to God and his family, and it's really his dream, not about the curriculum or about your church's program or about some small group thing. It is Jesus' dream to find a shepherd for every one of his sheep. And just remember the imagery where he jumped over the fence even to leave the 99 to go find the one stray that he could bring back into the fold. Would you encourage and model with your group this kind of thing? You may be thinking, you know, we've already got, Brett, 7 or 8 people in our group. How are we going to handle maybe 11 or 12? Well, we don't have any more space in our living room. There's not a spot on the couch or chair out of the kitchen. You know, that's where this new principle for most groups comes in, called subgrouping. And the same reason in a Sunday school class you break into smaller circles to discuss the study, this is a great way to involve more people so they could hear what God might want them to hear as they talk about the lesson that was just taught. This means that instead of making one huge circle for the whole meeting, and even if it's 12 people, they're not all being able to participate. 1 or 2 are more dominating and others are more quiet. But it gives you a chance to break into circles of 3 or 4 or 5 after the teaching segment to talk about and discuss the lesson. You can have 2 circles in the living room and 1 maybe in the dining room and maybe another, you know, even in the family room. My wife and I were in a group that did this. We encouraged and prayed for God to fill the open chair, to connect a few unconnected people. And in this couples group, there was just, 3 couples when we started. We added a few more, and we had 4 different circles that would meet in that house. Over time, one of the groups ended up starting on their own study. But we felt like we are part of a much bigger dream that Jesus had for his church and ultimately our community. Now, before we go on, Steve Farrar has a few practical thoughts on how you can lead this particular session.
Well, I think one of the central ideas of the passage is that we are to provoke, we are to stimulate, we are to incite one another to love and good works, to good deeds. I think that starts in this session tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can model that. And I think the way that you do that is well, I heard a great definition of preaching years ago by Martin Lloyd-Jones. He said that preaching or teaching is theology on fire. So you get your theology right. You work with the text and you got that down. But then you just don't teach it. You got to teach it with some juice. You got to have some fire. Well, you do. It's got to come from your splanka. Yeah. It's got to come from within.
Your splanka? No,
it's a Texas
part of the body.
term.
Okay.
Yeah, it comes from your gut. And I think it's just, you've seen guys teach, but there's no passion, there's no emotion. It's dull. It's a sin to bore people with the Bible. So I think in the group, you want to incite them. How do you do that? Well, there's got to be a passion in your own life. If you have a love for the truth, it'll come out. If you don't, that'll come out. If you don't have a love for the truth, you shouldn't be leading. Get somebody else.
The next thing we'd like to talk about is how you can involve more people in owning the group. We want to make a transition here from the group not being your group to being their group, or from my group to our group. Everyone knows and wants this, but not sure exactly how to get there. Here's some practical things. On the first question on question 10, which talks about the prayer and praise sheet on page 74 in your study guide, it's a great way to ask for a volunteer to keep track of the group prayer requests each time that they're shared. They might want to collect the prayer requests from several of the groups that are talking about their particular requests. So after you subgroup, this is a simple way to be able to encourage people to still do this, even though they may not feel like they want to do this because they want to hear everybody's requests. Pass them all into the one person who could write them out, maybe send them in an email or update everybody later. That way everybody knows exactly what's happening with everybody. But they can also be heard, each prayer request could be shared, and they can have more time praying for one another. The second way to involve more people is to ask a couple of volunteers to plan a group social. The second week of your study is a great time to be able to do this so that people don't feel like they're just sitting in that living room watching this study. They could get in a little more relaxed setting to be able to get to know people. You might do a potluck or a progressive dinner, or you could meet at a nice restaurant, with or maybe without the kids. One of the great ways to do this is many people might have not met the rest of the families, and so do a barbecue at a picnic or by a pool someplace. So you think about this, who are the group members who love to throw parties? I mean, they're just kind of like the regular party animals. You can see they're outgoing, they're gregarious. And if you're not sure who they are, maybe just ask the group. They'll tell you. You want to just tap them and ask them would they be willing before or after the group, or even ask the group to suggest, as I said. Now, I'd like to call your attention to question number 8 in your study guide. This is a significant opportunity to try to have people do an individual assessment of their own spiritual health. That will be a self-motivating feature to have them take a step of faith. As we look at this particular one, just see how people are doing in God's purpose of connecting with one another. As they look at the 5 questions in the health assessment on fellowship, they'll be able to kind of get their own assessment of where they'd like to go next. This is not necessarily that I'm better than you or I'm really this great Christian or something. It's not about trying to make God happy. You really want them to know this is about trying to take a next step in their spiritual journey in the area of fellowship. Jesus' dream was not cookies and punch on the patio. It really was a much deeper picture of koinonia that goes much farther than we will ever even experience until we're heaven-bound. However, grace is so important to be able to exhibit here because people are never where they want to be. It could be a great way if you do the assessment yourself right now, even before the meeting. So you can simply say, you know what? I did this assessment beforehand. And by the way, you might want to fill out the rest of it yourself. But when you come back and just answer in this session, and here's some things that I learned. And frankly, here's one area that I'd like to take a step of faith with. And you lead with the group on what you want to do. So give them some time to do that in the group. And then share the one area you're weak and the one area that you want to take a step in. You might even want to give the rest of the areas to them so that they could do it as homework to come back the next week. The final thing I'd like you to do is be willing to pass the baton to another person to host and lead the next meeting. If you haven't noticed already, this curriculum is designed with kind of a just add member kind of a strategy. It's kind of like the Blockbuster video approach to a small group. Anybody really could lead if you really give them a chance and you believe in them. So this is a great way for you to see the study through the eyes of different people who have different gifts than you or different temperament or even different genders. It will also push their growth into fast forward as they step up to meet the challenge. I'm so grateful for John Brosemley that looked me in the eye and said, Brett, you can do it. I believe in you. Let's make it happen. I wouldn't be here, and you might not be there if someone like John who hadn't challenged you to take that step of faith. Could you be that for the people in your group? Not just 1 or 2, but over time for every member. As Jesus says, we're not all called to be leaders. That's true. But we all are called to be shepherds of a few sheep over time. Whether that's 2 or 22 or something in between. I'm not saying more than what Jesus said. Well, that's it. Thanks for listening to all this. And again, remember that God said He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. And neither will I. I'll look forward to seeing you back at session 3.